She didn't fall in love with what you said, nor with what you did. Not even with the way you touched her that night when it seemed like everything would flow naturally. No. The moment she started to feel something real for you was when you left and didn't explain. When you didn't respond right away. When you showed up with a slight smile, but without justifying your absence. It was there, in the absence of explanation, that something inside her began to scream for more. What many men don't understand is that desire isn't born from certainty, but from doubt. Most guys spend their lives trying to prove their worth, provide evidence, justify themselves, be understandable, predictable, explainable. And that's precisely the mistake. Because a woman doesn't fall in love with your truth. She falls in love with what she imagines about you, with what she fills in her mind, with what you leave open. That's the invisible value. The kind of magnetism you don't explain, don't offer, don't label, but you insinuate. And if you think that's manipulation, then you haven't understood the nature of attraction. Seduction isn't what you show, it's what you masterfully conceal. Cleopatra was one of the most seductive women in history. And no, she wasn't the most beautiful. Historical accounts describe her as charming, intelligent, and with an intense presence, but almost never with captivating physical attributes. What Cleopatra mastered was the theater of the unspoken. She spoke 9 languages, created atmospheres with silences, made kings feel small and desired at the same time. Her presence was an enigma. And human beings are naturally attracted to what they don't understand. The mind detests a vacuum. Therefore, it fills what is missing with imagination. The Soviet psychologist Bluma Zygarnik observed that we are more likely to remember incomplete tasks than completed ones. This applies to memory, emotion, and, here comes the gold, seduction. When you reveal yourself completely, delivering a closed, safe, predictable narrative, you become forgettable. But when you leave holes in the story, loose details, mysteries in your behavior, she can't stop thinking about you. And that's the central point. True seductive power isn't in what you show. It's in what you let her imagine. A brutal example, desperate men on dating apps. They fill their bios with adjectives, explanations, jokes, hobbies, what they're looking for, demands, and catchy phrases. All to be clear. The result? Zero fascination, zero mystery, zero attraction. Now compare that to a profile that only has an elegant photo, an enigmatic phrase, and a restrained smile. There you have it. It's not about the quantity of information. It's about creating the right atmosphere so that her mind works in your favor. It's the same thing that happens in suspense films. You remember the creature of terror not when it appears, but before. When the camera only shows the half-open door, the panting breath, the creaking of the floor, and you imagine what's there. The tension is born from the gap. Fear is amplified by the absence of the visible. It's the same with seduction. Desire explodes in the absence of the explicit. And perhaps here you begin to understand why many nice, handsome, polite, and respectful guys end up being just friends. Because they are constantly trying to prove they are good. Trying to show their purity, their stability, their clarity. And this, although it may generate trust, kills the mystery. And where there is no mystery, there is no passion. Robert Greene writes that seduction is like theater. Show too much, and you kill the magic. When everything is laid bare, the stage loses its charm. The woman needs to feel she's entering a plot, not reading a report. She needs to be involved in an emotional journey where with each act you show one part and hide 2 others. That is seductive storytelling. And we're not talking about manipulating or inventing lies. This has nothing to do with falsehood. It has to do with narrative control. A magnetic man is not one who says, "I am mysterious." It's about not giving everything away at once. It allows itself to be read little by little. And more, it knows that each interaction should leave a question unanswered. Have you ever noticed that the most memorable characters in pop culture are those you never fully understand? Think of Thomas Shelby from Peaky Blinders, Tyler Durden from Fight Club, or Don Draper from Mad Men. Men who speak little, who don't easily reveal their pain, who lead conversations like dancers and disappear the moment you start to feel comfortable. This is addictive. But why is this so powerful with women? Simple. The female brain evolved to be highly sensitive to social nuances. It's a refined, emotional radar. And this radar needs stimulation. When you give everything away quickly, you deactivate the radar. When you give it away little by little in layers, with silences, with unexpected reactions, you keep her radar on. She becomes attentive to you, and attention is the first stage of desire. An important detail. Being mysterious isn't about being mute. It's not about being absent. It's not about playing games. It's about being selective with your words. It's about sharing stories that spark questions. It's about telling a true story and leaving the ending open. It's about showing vulnerability, but without explaining how you overcame it. It's about creating a field of unanswered questions that only time and shared experiences will unravel. Want to know the opposite of being seductive? Trying to convince. Nothing kills fascination more than the energy of someone trying to be accepted. Men who ask, "Was I nice? Did I bother you? Did you like what I said?" are neither dangerous nor fascinating. They are emotionally submissive. And you don't fall in love with someone who kneels before the kiss. But what about when a woman demands more explanations? When she says, "You never talk about yourself," or "You're very closed off"? Great. That's a sign that you've activated the space of curiosity. Instead of opening up like a cheap book, you can simply say, "There are things I prefer to reveal over time." Or, "I've given things away too easily in the past. Today I prefer to be read little by little." There you go. You didn't lie, you didn't play games, but you reaffirmed the narrative. Access to you is rare, and everything that is rare is more desired. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "What is good? Everything that increases power. What is bad? Everything that is born of weakness." Showing too much, explaining too much, opening up without criteria is a sign of emotional weakness. The seductive man doesn't need to prove anything. His life speaks for him. His gaze carries history. His absence has more impact than the discourse of others. This leads us to the most brutal point. You will only be able to create this invisible value when you stop seeking approval. Most men try to be validated, to be chosen, to be loved. But true power emerges when you reverse the emotional game. When she is the one trying to discover more. When she is the one who wants to understand you. When she's the one who feels challenged by not being able to label you. The most dangerous thing you can be to a woman is emotionally predictable. But the second most dangerous, and even more lethal, is simply being a trigger for tension. Many men try so hard to appear interesting, intense, confident, or even mysterious that they forget the most powerful factor in attraction: emotional relief. Yes, she may find you handsome, intriguing, desirable, but she will only become attached if you are the place where her mind rests. And that doesn't mean being passive, submissive, or a pushover. It means being the emotional counterpoint to the chaos she lives in inside. Understand, a woman's world is made up of intense stimuli, social pressures, subtle judgments, and a constant need to be adequate. Even the most emotionally strong women live in an invisible minefield of internal insecurities, mental overload, and external demands. That's why, amidst all of this, the man who doesn't compete for attention, who doesn't justify himself, who doesn't demand anything, and yet manages to read what she feels without her saying a word, becomes practically irresistible. That's the power of emotional refuge. A man like that doesn't enter her life to prove something. He enters like a calm mirror, like a silence that speaks louder than words, like an emotional pause where she can breathe without feeling judged. And that, my friend, is rare. Very rare. Most men react to female emotions with judgment, rationalization, or control. When she's unstable, he tries to fix her. When she expresses herself, he says, "Calm down." When her mood changes, he takes it personally. And then guess what? She shuts down, and the desire dies. There's a concept in emotional psychology called codependent affective regulation, where two people unconsciously exchange emotional states. In the field of seduction, that's gold. Because a man who knows how to regulate his own internal state and at the same time guide a woman's emotional state to a lighter, more intense, or more nurturing place becomes something far more than a partner. He becomes an emotional gateway to a better version of herself. And guess what? Her brain gets addicted to it. That's the logic behind emotional addiction. It's not about looks. It's not about catchphrases. It's about how she feels around you. Does she feel more beautiful? More confident, more intelligent, or more tense, more judged, more doubtful? If her presence by your side doesn't transform her internal state, then you're not making an emotional impact. And without an emotional impact, there's no attachment. Without attachment, there's no passion. Don Draper, in the series Mad Men, is a classic example. He's not just mysterious. He has a gaze that understands without intruding, listens without judging, and speaks with pauses that suggest more than they impose. Even amidst chaos and manipulation, the character creates an emotional space where women feel heard. It's as if he's saying without words, "You don't need to be anyone other than yourself here with me." This feeling of implicit acceptance is what breaks down defenses. But be warned, this isn't about being nice or friendly. It's about having strategic emotional intelligence. It's about knowing how to contain unnecessary reactions, choosing silence when it speaks louder, and above all, listening without rushing to respond. Do you know why most men fail at this? Because they listen to respond, not to understand. They turn her moment into a test for themselves. That's ego. And ego is the worst misfortune in the emotional game. The true seducer momentarily dissolves his own ego to enter her world barefoot. He doesn't invade, he welcomes with presence. There's a technique I teach to few, but you deserve to hear it here. It's called validating the invisible layer. It's simple, but brutally effective. It works like this. When she's talking about something trivial, about work, about traffic, about a friend, you don't respond to the literal content, but to the underlying emotion. Example, she says, "My boss scheduled another last-minute meeting." An average man responds, "Seriously, that's annoying." A seductive man responds, "You must be feeling suffocated, right? Like nobody respects your time." Boom. You validated the invisible emotion that even she couldn't name. This generates a visceral connection. Because you showed that you see beyond, and women fall in love with those who see them where they didn't even know they were. But why does this work so well? Because emotional validation activates the limbic system, responsible for effective memory and attachment. Every time you name an emotion she feels but doesn't express, her brain associates you with unconscious emotional security. And emotional security is the necessary foundation for passion to flourish without guilt. Now comes the paradox. The more you become that emotional refuge, the more powerful your absence becomes. Yes, when she feels that with you there is peace, presence, freedom to be, the mere idea of losing you will hurt. It will bother her. It will create gaps. Because you won't just be a nice guy. You will be the mental space she wants to inhabit when the world is screaming too loudly. Therefore, contrary to what simplistic manuals say, the seductive man doesn't run away from female emotional intensity. He goes through it. He reads between the lines, grasps the subtext, understands that an "I'm fine" can mean, "Prove to me that I can trust you." And he doesn't respond with logic. He responds with presence, because presence is the new form of power. And here's an uncomfortable truth. Most women have never been truly heard by a man. They have been analyzed, corrected, interrupted, judged, but heard, read, reflected upon with elegance? Almost never. If you are the first to offer this, not as a technique, but as a natural state, you will be unforgettable. But let's go further. The most common mistake men make when trying to apply this is becoming the accessible psychologist. That guy who only listens, only supports, only says yes. That's not emotional refuge, that's emotional submission. And submission doesn't attract. You need to maintain your energetic authority. How? With silent boundaries, with firmness without tension, with a presence that says, "I welcome you, but I don't lose myself in you." That's subtle strength. It's the balance between empathy and structure. If you want to be her emotional refuge, you need to be your own first refuge. If you don't regulate your emotions, if you don't know how to silence your own mind, if you can't stand being alone with yourself in silence, you will react, flee, project, or go into control mode. The true seducer trains his emotional center like a samurai trains his focus. He observes himself, he adjusts, he chooses the moment to speak. And this creates a magnetic field. Most women aren't looking for a perfect man. They're looking for a man who doesn't waver in his presence. A man who, even in silence, brings emotional structure to the environment. And this can't be faked. This is built. Notice, the most magnetic men in the world speak little, listen with their eyes, and only open their mouths to move the woman's emotional narrative somewhere. That's power. And power is seductive because it activates the instinct for protection, and at the same time, the instinct for voluntary submission. The woman wants to surrender, not to an arrogant jerk, but to a man who can, with just a few words, dissolve the chaos within her. There's something disturbing, almost unfair, about how desire behaves. When you chase it, it distances itself. When you offer too much, it hides. When you need it, it flees, and when you don't need it, it appears. But the most shocking thing is that this pattern isn't an accident. It's the very nature of human desire. And here's the brutal truth. What makes a woman fall in love with you isn't your attempt to conquer her, but your ability not to try. To be so centered, so fulfilled, so strategically present, and at the same time free from the need for approval, that she begins to see you as a possibility and not as a demand. That's what I call magnetic inversion. The moment you step out of the role of conqueror and become the prize. And no, this isn't about arrogance, it's about energetic posture. A woman doesn't fall in love with someone who gives themselves away easily. She might like you, she might respect you, she might even sleep with you. But emotional attachment, the kind that makes her think about you in the middle of the day, stalk your profile, fantasize about a reunion, only happens when you represent an unresolved emotional tension. It's when you seem too secure to chase, too good to be ignored, too intense to be deciphered, available but not accessible. This paradox is what makes her want you without understanding why. Think of the greatest seducers in history. Casanova didn't flatter, James Dean didn't beg, Tony Stark didn't seek approval. They weren't trying to pick up women. They were living a magnetic life full of purpose, mystery, and unspoken confidence. And women felt challenged, intrigued, attracted. This happens because the female mind is naturally programmed to value what is scarce, what doesn't bend, what imposes an emotional doubt. The man who seems to already have the world and yet notices her with interest triggers desire on a visceral level. It's simple. The less you seem to need a woman, the more she'll wonder if she can win you over. And that doubt is what triggers emotional investment. But pay attention. This isn't about feigning disinterest. This is about being truly at peace with the idea of not having her. It's about having the maturity to feel attraction and still maintain composure. It's about knowing how to play the emotional game without actually playing it. It's about the man who looks her in the eyes, smiles gently, flirts with presence, but doesn't fall apart inside. This kind of posture creates an atmosphere where the woman feels you are in control of yourself. And every human being is attracted to someone who masters their own inner state. It's as if she's saying, if he can handle himself, maybe he can handle me. And this assumption is the first step towards enchantment. There's a law in the field of seduction that few understand. Intention without tension is irresistible. You can show interest, you can compliment, you can touch, but as long as there's no hidden emotional pressure, as long as you don't need her to reciprocate. When you act without expectation, you activate curiosity. And curiosity is the beginning of attachment. Want a practical example? Two men say the same thing. I loved seeing you today. One says it anxiously, expecting validation. The other says it lightly, expecting nothing in return. The first conveys neediness. The second conveys power. You need to be the second. Magnetic inversion isn't about being difficult, but about being too preoccupied with your own greatness to need proving anything. The man who lives on a mission, who has a greater purpose, who moves with focus and elegance, who knows his attention is rare. That man doesn't need to chase, he walks, and she follows. And if she doesn't follow, he continues. And that's what holds her. But let's go deeper. The real challenge of magnetic inversion is abandoning the role of emotional dependent disguised as a seducer. It's the guy who thinks he's being irresistible, but is just being predictable. He says, "You're beautiful," expecting gratitude. He sends goodnight, expecting a response. He invites her out and gets frustrated when she takes too long. These micro-reactions show that you're still playing to gain approval. And as long as you play like that, you've already lost. The woman perceives this. Even unconsciously, she senses when a man isn't fully present. And no matter how much she smiles, responds, or flirts, she doesn't give herself emotionally, because she only gives herself to those who don't need her to feel complete. You're here because you already know the truth. Being the good guy didn't make you desired. Being kind brought comfort, not attraction. Being stable made you safe, not unforgettable. And comfort without tension never creates desire. Now you're at a crossroads. You either keep trying to earn attraction by being passive, or you learn how desire is actually triggered through presence, influence, and controlled tension. That's exactly why the Forbidden Manual, How to Trigger Desire in 60 Seconds, exists. This audiobook is not self-help. It's a direct psychological manual that shows how desire is activated in real time through posture, silence, eye contact, and strategic communication. You'll learn why most words fail, how to create emotional tension in under a minute, and how to leave a lasting impression without forcing anything. This isn't theory. It's practical, immediate, and unapologetically real. What's inside isn't politically correct, but it works. That's why it's forbidden. If you're tired of being overlooked, tired of doing everything right and getting nothing back, this is the shift. Attraction stops being about pleasing and starts being about provoking. Click the button, access the full audiobook, and become the kind of man who doesn't chase attention, but makes it inevitable.